Thank you very much. Thanks for that kind introduction, and thank you to Global Grain Geneva for inviting me here today to speak on our firm, Bloomberg Grain, and the projects that we're focused on in the Middle East and North Africa. The presentation that I'll be giving today is entitled Food Security in the Middle East and North Africa, a Problem of Post-Harvest Losses. And I, again, am David Bloomberg, the CEO of Bloomberg Grain, Middle East and North Africa. I'd just like to start off with a figure, $1 trillion US. I'd like you to think about that for a minute. It's more than just 1 followed by 12 zeros. It's certainly a lot of money, but let's try and put it into perspective. For the economists in the room, that's equivalent to about the GDP of much of the Middle East and North Africa. Now that we're at Global Grain Geneva, many of you here are grain traders, and you might be interested to know that $1 trillion might be able to buy you 33,000 Panamax dry bulk vessels. And because we're in Geneva, and we're all going to be stopping by the kiosk and maybe convenience store to pick up a souvenir on the way out, if you had $1 trillion, you'd be able to buy 63 million Swiss Army knives. But none of us have $1 trillion to spend, let alone $1 trillion to waste. And perhaps that's the most important statement. Because every year across the globe, we lose about $1 trillion in food waste. What may be even more surprising, however, is that the bulk of that food is not lost in our trash or in the dumps. In fact, the bulk of that food is lost before that food hits the point of first sale. It's lost before the product actually gets to market. And it's lost, in many cases, due to the lack of infrastructure in emerging markets, like the warehouse that you see in this photo above, or the warehouse that you see here in West Africa, or the warehouse here in India, or as they call them, go-downs. The situation is one that struck my father, Philip Bloomberg, the chairman of Bloomberg Partners, our holding firm. And he recognized that there was a problem and created Bloomberg Grain to help solve it. Bloomberg Grain is the food security division of Bloomberg Partners, a holding company that was founded in 1979 by my father. That's primary investment, or primary activity is actually in the real estate and investment funds business. In fact, the company has a very strong track record in investment, about 18% average annual returns over its history, and primarily focused on the office building space, particularly in the United States, where we have a number of holdings. The company has a very conservative investment ethic, and because of that, the firm was able to navigate the waters of the market crash in 2007 and actually divest many of the assets prior to that crash, returning record returns to our investors and allowing the company to start diversifying into many different sectors. One of the sectors in which the company diversified was that of food security, because the investment team that my father had put together was traveling around the globe looking at different investments in commodities. And one of those trips actually led them to India. And in India, during that trip, the company was actually evaluating a potential solar field opportunity, but paired to that solar field opportunity was a grain storage facility. Or as I said, in India, they call them go-downs. And unfortunately, that year, there was a significant bumper harvest, a positive thing in most countries, but unfortunately for India that year, it was coupled by a lack of storage capacity. So there was grain piled on the outside of go-downs, and as the monsoons rolled over the plains, the grain would obviously be washed into the streets, and then decimated by pigs, rodents, cows, etc. The post-harvest losses, just due to the lack of storage capacity in India that year, numbered by some estimates around 30%. And this was really a tragedy that struck my father and struck our team, and set us on the path to see what, as a company who was engaged in real estate and property management, in the management of office buildings, could actually do in this particular area. But we decided that we had to take a look because we knew that the problem wasn't singular in terms of its geography. It wasn't only India that was experiencing these problems. In fact, when we looked at the broader markets and looked at emerging markets, particularly in Africa, what the company was able to find was that about 50% of the product that is harvested off the field doesn't make it to that point of first sale. And it's due to a challenge of logistics and a challenge of infrastructure. So what the firm set out to do was to pair our capabilities in office buildings, actually, in property management, where the firm was one of the first to pioneer advents such as the ability to track the elevator in every elevator bay in all properties across the United States, understand what the temperature was in each foyer across every building, and apply some of that technology to another industry, the food security industry, where rather than dealing with tenants that were people, we were dealing with food products. And we weren't naive in doing that. The company decided to first and foremost bring on the best of the best in agricultural engineering, develop a research and engineering facility in Ames, Iowa, the capital of grain, quote unquote, in the United States. I developed a relationship with Iowa State University, the largest agricultural engineering university in the US, and set out to develop technologies targeted towards the emerging markets. And that was an important point, because when looking at the issue of agricultural storage, all too often, the solution from developing countries is to apply what works in your own nation to the situation in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, Latin America, so on and so forth. But we knew that we had to educate our agricultural engineers and the other experts on our team and acclimate them to the situations and the challenges that were unique to the environments that we were targeting. And again, those environments were environments where there was a lack of electrical infrastructure, a lack of road transport infrastructure, a lack of trucking infrastructure, trucking capacity. And that very quickly led our company to the conclusion that we would pursue this avenue of food security by implementing and developing systems that revolved around a horizontal warehouse storage system. Bloomberg Grain set out to develop a number of different technologies in this space, both for the storage of dry products as well as the storage of perishable products. In the dry product arena, we paired technologies dealing with handling, dealing with bagging, dealing with hermetic storage, two technologies having to do with security, access management, and network management as well. On the cold storage side of the equation, Bloomberg Grain set out to develop the highest levels of technology, not only in refrigeration, but also in controlled atmosphere, whereby our company utilizes nitrogen gas to displace the oxygen in environments in order to lower those O2 levels, darken the environments, cool the environments, and place the product into a state of suspended animation. The effect of this on the grain side of the equation when it comes to hermetic storage means that one can store grain for literally decades on end, unchanged, and in the case of our SCBS system, naturally fumigate the product by, in essence, suffocating any of the organic matter instead of having to use any fumigants. On the cold storage side of the equation, by placing fruits and vegetables in a state of suspended animation, one can hold on to mangoes, for example, for 6 months or more. What that does for a farmer, trader, or even country is allow for market timing arbitrage that is able to significantly increase the profits of any operation, or in the case of government, stabilize food prices. This is something that we have been championing across the emerging markets, and particularly starting off in sub-Saharan Africa, where the company has seen success in a number of markets, whether it be in Senegal, where we partnered with USAID, as well as the PCE, the Senegalese Department of Agriculture, or in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where our company has worked in the Katanga province, the province actually about the size of France, and the most mineral-rich province in the DRC, to develop corn value chains. Or in Nigeria, where under the leadership of former Minister of Agriculture Akin Adesina, we were engaged to develop a network of cold storage warehouses to, for the first time, implement controlled atmosphere technology in Nigeria for some of the cooperatives across the country. But the project that I want to focus on today is a project that we are implementing in Egypt under the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade, where our company is developing the largest grain storage network in the Middle East and North Africa. This project is a project that was conceived by the Minister of Supply and developed by Bloomberg Grain to remediate the issues in what are called the Shona system. The Shona system, for those of you who aren't aware, is a system that feeds what's called the Baladi bread program in Egypt. Baladi meaning bread of our country, and that program being a program that distributes subsidized bread to the entirety of the population. If some of you are aware of the turmoil that's occurred in Egypt in recent years, and aware of the issues and factors that led to Mubarak's overthrow, you may also be aware that the day that the people took to the streets in Egypt coincided with the day that Mubarak had to raise the price of that Baladi bread. It was the increase in price of this Baladi bread that set off riots across the country, and similarly the increase in the cost of food that led to Arab Springs all across the region. This is something that the follow-up administrations, whether it be the Muslim Brotherhood or the current Sisi administration, were very aware of and wanted to guard against. Bloomberg Grain had been working for many years in the region, developing programs to try and improve food security. And it was finally under the leadership of President Sisi that this project, the Shona Development Project, finally got its wings. I'd like to show you a brief video on the Shona Development Project to give you a sense of what it is we're doing in Egypt, perspective on the technology we're implementing, and a brief understanding of the far-reaching benefits of the program, not only when it comes to helping mitigate post-harvest losses, but also the effects of the program when it comes to further agricultural improvements across the value chain, improvements in national security, but most importantly, from an economic standpoint, an improvement in the safeguarding of a supply chain that in the past was losing about 50% of its crop. So I'm going to switch over to the video very briefly, and hopefully without any technical difficulties, you all can hear the entire video.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Bloomberg Grain and the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade, I would like to welcome you all to this very special day.
The first phase of the Shona Development Project we are introducing to you today will create the largest and most sophisticated grain storage network in the Middle East and North Africa.
I'm extraordinarily pleased and honored to be present with you today to mark what I say is a historic and significant milestone. The Shona Development Project is a major infrastructure project. With projects such as this one we're commemorating today, Egypt is demonstrating the potential and the value of the government-business partnership in tackling difficult and critical infrastructure challenges.
Thanks again for Bloomberg that enabled us to design and to tailor this after having a visit with the engineering authority of the armed force in Egypt to see the system that exists in the United States, and we developed this system. What we did and what we are going now to see is that we converted a very primitive system, consists of wastes, damage, to a new system which is very modern, linked electronically, creating data warehouses, enabling us to do some data mining, to link the existing system with the system that we already went through the food subsidy system, the bread distribution system. So it's an integrated system that we already went through. Our journey with Bloomberg, we're not going to end at this stage because we are very ambitious in Egypt, and we are going to develop the sector of distribution of food, generally speaking, grains specifically. So we're talking about logistics areas, we're talking about more granaries to be distributed in different systems. We initiated 105 units scattered over the country, and now we have an intention to increase the number to 294 units, to have more and more, and to have the whole system completed.
In the unveiling of such an important beneficial project, we affirm again the strength and commitment of the relationship between our two nations, made possible through the close collaboration of an American business, Bloomberg Grain, and the Ministry of Supply and the Ministry of Defense.
All right. Thanks for bearing with us on that. The project that you saw in the video that was just played, it's a project that does much more than revamp the Shona system, but it enables the government to have modern storage and processing for its locally grown wheat. We do that through the Bloomberg Grain Loop that you saw in the video, which enables the, first off, cleaning and screening of the wheat that's coming into the Shona, which was a large issue due to the fact that, for example, farmers who were depositing grain would literally throw in rocks and stones, or in some extreme cases, wet their wheat in order to get a higher price for it, to weigh it down. In addition to screening and grading that wheat, we're able to dry the wheat in the dryers that are provided in the Bloomberg Grain Loop, and also bag the wheat on a 50 to 100 kg bag level according to its specific grade. The grade's important because in Egypt, there's a good amount of durum wheat that's produced in certain regions that can sell for about 1.5 times more on the local markets. And until today, that wheat was simply being mixed into the Baldy bread program rather than being segregated. In addition, this Bloomberg Grain Processing Loop is designed to accept a number of different commodities as the government is pushing for a diversification of the crops that are procured through its public procurement system, including crops like corn, as well as soya and some rice. But beyond the actual processing that goes on in the actual warehouse, the program also allows for the networked management of the 294 Shona across the country. That networked management of the program happens in our Bloomberg Grain Command and Control Center, which is located in Cairo in a building that is owned by the holding company for sales and storage. It's in this command center that our company is able to track up-to-the-minute details of the inventory levels that the government has in its locally procured wheat. It's the first time that the government of Egypt will have an understanding of how much wheat they have on hand. Up until today, that program has been, or that objective has been met through literally handwritten records that have never actually been tallied up and have had a number of significant issues in terms of their distribution of information to the central command. In addition, in the command and control center, the company is able to monitor the actual operations of the entire network, turning on and off systems, setting on and off warnings, understanding access and egress on a per individual basis, and as well create a platform for a commodities exchange that could be developed in the MENA region through the Ministry of Supply and Internal Trade and through the information that is gathered in our inventory management program. The system, to give you the numbers in terms of what this Shona development project is going to produce, is something that's quite significant. 294 sites all across the country, spanning from Upper Egypt down in the southern portion of the country, all along the Nile Delta up to Alexandria, producing about 11.4 million square feet of storage capacity. That equates to about 2.35 million metric tons of static storage, 11.7 million metric tons of processing capacity per year. And it consists of a system that has 12 kilometers of conveyors, has about 1.6 million nuts and bolts, 1,000 cameras all across the system, and a system that will, in its end state, allow for the storage of about 27 kilograms of wheat per Egyptian. So it's a significant system, and a significant system that will enable significant benefits. Benefits tallying up to about $600 million per year. Those benefits are ascribed to, first and foremost, the amount of wheat that is going to be able to be saved in the system as compared to the Shona system that you saw in the video. As I described earlier, the post-harvest loss rate in Egypt under these Shona are about 50% at this point. 30% is a conservative estimate, but you saw the photos and you understand through that depiction that due to issues of atmosphere, due to issues of rodents, insects, and to be honest with you, due to issues of birds, specifically the pigeon that plagues these Shonas, there's a significant amount of waste. But there's also a significant amount of leakage, a significant amount of pilferage, a significant amount of corruption. And through the network management program that we implemented in the command center, the government will be able to identify any leakages that occur in the system by tracking the grain not only at the actual Shona warehouse, but in transport to the final processing centers for the Baladi bread bakeries. Understanding when a truck leaves the Shona system, where it ends up, at what weight it leaves, and at what weight it enters and deposits into the final mill. And in that way, actually identifying if there's any loss in transit. In addition to remediating these losses, through the development of this Shona infrastructure, the government will be able to expand the capacity of grains that it stores. As I mentioned earlier, the government will be able to start playing a much more significant role in the procurement of crops that they are trying to incentivize, such as corn, and specifically corn due to the fact that the government is looking to move away from water-intensive crops such as rice. In addition to that, value addition will occur throughout the value chain in the Shona system. Through the grading capabilities that I described earlier, the government will be able to segregate the different types of wheat that it procures, but also through the processing component of the system, they will be able to add value to the product by creating a uniform and Unicode moisture content all across the product, by being able to segregate that product, by being able to create a more efficient handling mechanism by which product can leave the warehouse in a much more efficient manner. In addition to this, other benefits to the project include obviously a decrease in the amount of foreign currency going abroad due to the amount of funds that the government outlays in terms of imported wheat into Egypt, which you all are very familiar with. But also, across the entire agricultural value chain, this project will have effects on processors, on logistics operators, and others who benefit from an increase in the amount of output in the system. And as mentioned, in Egypt, due to prior issues in the Balti bread program, there has been turbulence in the country. Through an initiative such as the Shona Development Project, the government is tackling head-on a problem that has plagued their population and created instability for itself. And in doing so, they're tackling a number of issues, not only related to political instability, but also related to national security. The linkage may not seem obvious, but our governments in the developing world are extremely aware of the fact that with a lack of food security, there's also a lack of an ability to create prosperity for populations that may be susceptible to extremism. And that is something that our company has seen all across the countries that we work, whether it's in Nigeria, where the Boko Haram are prevalent in the northeast of the country, and primarily expanding due to the lack of economic opportunities and the drying up of the lakes in that region, or in Egypt, where a lack of economic opportunity has driven individuals into extremism and created a situation by which we see an unfortunate increase of terrorist activity in the Sinai. The President Sisi is aware of this and aware of the linkage between food security and national security, making it a priority in his administration to ensure that there is food security for all Egyptians. But beyond that, in terms of a more sustainable long-term change, there is a view in Egypt and across all of the emerging markets to at some point move from a public sector dependent system to a private sector driven agricultural value chain. And our system and our developments take that into consideration, because our programs and our technology is easily transferred into the private sector. And particularly with the command center capabilities that I described earlier, we are able to work with groups such as the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to first set up indexes for items like Egyptian-grown wheat, and then down the line necessitate the, for example, Egyptian Commodities Exchange, which, as everyone here knows, was a very strong commodities exchange, and particularly in cotton, but went the wayside and went dormant throughout the turmoil and turbulence that the country experienced. There is no reason, however, that these commodities exchanges will not resurface. And it's happening all across the Middle East and North Africa. It's happening in sub-Saharan Africa with a number of different commodities exchange builders looking to establish themselves and create commodities exchanges either within an individual country or across a region. And the one thing that resounds across this entire strategy is that in order to create the scale and enable the activity that is required for such a commodities exchange, one needs to set the platform and the foundation through the development of food security storage. And our company is well positioned to take advantage of that potential. It's well positioned to take advantage of the $7 billion market in the Middle East and North Africa, as determined by the amount of post-harvest loss that occurs in that region alone. It's poised, and we're making inroads into India, where about 1 million metric tons of food are lost every year due to issues of logistics and poor infrastructure. And we're poised to become the leaders in food security in emerging markets, developing systems and technology for the issues and obstacles that are encountered in those particular markets, specifically as it relates to issues such as electricity and the lack of road transport networks. The need to be able to implement these systems quickly is of primary concern to Bloomberg Grain, particularly because of the challenges in developing these networks and the time it takes to, for example, establish a food security network like a silo, which may take a year, 2 years to develop, and lose out on 2 to 4 harvest seasons, and therefore dropping your return on investment dramatically. In contrast, our systems are designed to be developed incredibly rapidly. Our system in Egypt, the first 93, are going up right now, should be completed in the next 157 days. The systems, for example, a 8,000 metric ton warehouse is able to go up in a matter of a few weeks. And this is something that is important in terms of addressing issues as they arise in these emerging markets to respond to bumper harvests and also just respond to food crises. And in a world where we see climate change taking on a more active role as it relates to price shocks, shocks in production, and shocks in distribution capabilities, it's important that we safeguard the product that's produced and important that we remediate and ameliorate the $1 trillion that is lost in food product every single year. So with that, I'll conclude my presentation and open up the floor to questions.
Just to ask you one question here. You mentioned 11 million storage capacity. Does that refer to metal silos or concrete silos?
So I mentioned 11 million metric tons of processing capacity in the system. The static capacity, the 294 Shona, is about 2.3 million metric tons, and that is in a warehouse capacity. It's a horizontal storage infrastructure that on average accommodates about 8,000 metric tons of grain per site.
So no metallic silos there?
That is a totally different program, and if you all are familiar with the Egyptian storage infrastructure, you're aware of the silo storage program that's being developed. I believe about 65 silos going up right now. Hopefully will be opened in the next year or so, funded by the UAE. That is for predominantly the imported grain that comes into country. Our program focuses on the locally harvested grain, and the reason that we do that is because the Shona sites that we are redeveloping are the sites that were already in existence to capture the locally harvested wheat that the government procures to enable to support the farmers in country. But I don't mean to continue to go on a tangent, but the important item to take note of in the system is that the government is paying about $400 per metric ton for local farmers to sell their product to the government and feed into this quality bread program. Obviously, they're subsidizing it to a very large degree and providing a price support for the farmers. And that's a price support that the farmers have relied on for decades and decades.
Just one more question. Does your program extend to the actually grinding the wheat, which means milling units?
The milling occurs off-site from the Shonas. So, as I described earlier, what happens is the Shonas are the collection and storage nexus for the distribution of that quality bread wheat. From the Shona, the product moves to the quality bread mills. The problem that has been occurring is that there's not only loss in the Shona, but also loss in transit, either due to corruption or due to pilferage. And the milling facilities are facilities that will be equipped in the second phase of this project with Bloomberg grain technology in order to be able to scan in all of the product that makes its way from the Shona to the mill in order to ensure that there is no loss in transit. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Where is all your technology produced and your systems? Where is anything made in the Middle East, or is it all come from the United States?
All of our technology comes from the United States. It's designed and developed in Ames, Iowa, as I mentioned, in our Research and Engineering Center in Ames, in collaboration with Iowa State University, and we engage a number of other universities as well. The manufacturing network that we rely upon is based in the United States at the present time. However, our holding company, Bloomberg Partners, is looking to situate a number of manufacturing facilities in the markets that matter most to us. Another division of the company, Bloomberg Steel, is the one that's engaged in designing and deploying those manufacturing facilities. And we're very strongly considering countries like Egypt, like Algeria, like Oman, the UAE, and the Middle East and North Africa region, as well as in Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, and a number of manufacturing capabilities that we're looking at in different states in India. The manufacturing program is one that would provide obviously a number of benefits to the countries in which it's situated. On average, KPMG estimates that the manufacturing facility would provide about $1 billion worth of economic impact per year to the country it's situated in, by way of additional employment, by way of increases in trade, increased foreign direct investment in terms of ancillary businesses. And we're working with HOK, one of the largest architectural engineering firms in the United States, to deploy these facilities. Okay.
Do you have any more questions? David, just before you go, I just wanted to ask you if you're looking at other countries in the Middle East.
Yes, we are. In fact, right now we have a team roaming around the Middle East. They've most recently been to Algeria, where there's a similar issue to what I've described in Egypt as it relates to grain procurement and a subsidized distribution system, as well as travels to countries such as Oman, UAE, KSA, where the situation is entirely different and predominantly revolves around a need to safe house grain and other products once they are imported into country, for fear of the fact that there may be a crisis, for example, in the Straits of Hormuz, and not only not allow oil, for example, to go out, which is what many in the West are afraid of, but not allow food and other vital products to go in. So those are some of the other countries that we're looking at in the region, but we're also very aggressive in markets such as Latin America, as well as India.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, David.
Thank you.